As most of you know, Australia has suffered terribly with horrendous bushfires, so I wanted to dedicate this video to them. They've lost nearly 500 million of wildlife, communities are being scorched, and to put it frank, they're just in dire need of help. If you'd like to donate and contribute, you can go to the bushfire emergency website that's on screen now that will be linked in the description below as well as in a pinned comment. I will also be donating all of the money that I make off of this video from the ads directly to the fund. If any of my Australian fans are watching this, please know you have my full support and I want to help any way possible. Once again, the link to the Bushfire Fund will be linked in the description and in a pinned comment. All that being said, here's the stories. About 15 years ago, when I was about 21 years old, I had a night out with some of my friends on the Gold Coast in Australia. I walked up the highway at about 2 a.m. all alone on my way home. It was about a 10-minute walk. The streetlights were on, so the area was pretty well lit up, but there were no cars really passing at that hour. I start to hear the sound of a huge truck coming up the road and not really thinking much of it. As soon as the truck almost passed me, I then hear the sound of the gears changing and the truck slowing down until he stops. He yells out and he asks if I needed a lift, which I decline and just keep walking. At this point, I thought it was really sweet asking a young woman if she needed a lift because I certainly shouldn't have been walking alone at this time. His truck is on the other side of the road, and I then see the door open, and he starts to get out. I then freeze for about a second, and we make eye contact, and now I know that I have to run. I ran so fast all the way through the back streets with him chasing me all the way. Thankfully for me, the man was overweight, so I was able to outrun him, but he probably chased me for a few good minutes. I finally made it home and then ran inside, and I woke up my housemate who told me that I was white as a ghost. I always think about that night and I wonder what might have happened if he had caught up to me. It's been 15 years since that happened, and the anxiety is still fresh as the day it happened. A few years ago, I went on a study abroad trip with my university to Australia for a couple of months. We started in Darwin and traveled south. Now, the bus ride itself was pretty uneventful, except for me and my friend being accidentally left at the Devil's Marbles for a few hours, but that's another story. We stayed at a hostel in Alice Springs and then got up before dawn to drive to Uluru. The rest of the students had decided to go back to sleep for the bus ride, but I was looking out the window at what little I could make of the scenery. It was right around that time, right before dawn, when you're first able to make out your surroundings. The bus slowed down to park and made a turn into an empty lot, and that's when I saw it. It was an extremely large shadow walking through the bush. I'm a pretty bad judge of height, but it was taller than any human I had ever seen. Perhaps about 10 feet tall with extremely elongated arms and legs. Even though there was enough light to make out the details of the landscape, the figure appeared completely, detailless. Like it was smooth, black, and completely featureless. The black was a stark contrast to the rest of the scenery, as there was a thin mist in the area. Now, I've seen flashes of shadows driving before, or something out of the corner of my eye, but this was something different. I was able to watch it for several slow seconds as he walked in this weird odd swaying. It was this weird dipping motion with a distinct grace, moving effortlessly across the bush. I felt like as soon as I saw it, I had been electrocuted. Every hair standing up and skin prickling. I tried to wake up my friend, but by the time she looked out the window, it was long gone. Now, I'm sure this could be explained away by possible sleep deprivation or just seeing shadows, but I personally feel that what I saw was real. If anyone has any kind of local legends for that area, please let me know. This happened back in the 90s when I was still in primary school, so I really had no clue how much danger I was actually in. I would have been around 11 years old, living in a regional city of Australia. Now, for the last year, I had been having a lot of trouble at school. I was getting bullied a bit by my classmates and just felt really singled out by my teacher. My mom worked around the corner from my school, so when everything would get too much at school, I would literally just walk out of class down the road and onto her work site. It would take me about a half an hour to walk there, along a main road. There were a couple of times that I noticed a small white car drive past me just really slowly. But I only noticed this because I would see the same car go up and down the street as I was walking and while I was sitting outside of my mom's work site. After a while, I started seeing the same car driving up my street at home, parked along the streets that my brother and I would ride our bikes around. I don't remember thinking it was strange because it was such a small town and it wasn't unusual to see the same cars and people. It was just like, oh, there goes that car again. Well, anyway, my family follows a serious routine. Mondays, swimming and tutoring. Tuesdays, netball training. Wednesday, netball game. Thursdays, basketball training. And Fridays, we would go and see the professional basketball or football depending on the season. Saturday was my brother's basketball games. And Sundays were our day where we'd go to the river with friends for swims and a barbecue lunch. This never changed unless someone was sick. So one Friday night, I'm dressed and ready to go and watch the basketball game, but I can't find my shoes. I'm pretty sure that they're in the car, which is in the garage under our 2-story house. Now, to get to it, I have to walk down the outside steps at the front of the house, which has a full view of the road. I walk out the front door, and at the end of our driveway is that small white car. Now, I've never taken that much notice of the white cars up until this point, and it wasn't uncommon for cars to park in this exact spot for our neighbors. But I just got a weird sinking feeling deep in my stomach when I looked at it. I kept walking down the stairs, and as I got close to the bottom, the driver's side door then opens, and then this man gets out very quickly. I keep walking towards the garage, and he starts moving towards our driveway. That was the moment when something inside me just told me to scream for my parents and then run and lock myself in the car. I did exactly that, and this guy, whoever he was, turned around, ran back to his car, and then drove off. By the time my parents heard me and came out, there was absolutely no evidence that this even happened, and they didn't even believe me. About a week later in my school, there happened to be a notice in our school newsletter about some man in a white car that was attempting to abduct another child from my school on the very same night. My parents were very shaken over this, and they took me seriously after reading that. I don't believe he was ever caught, but it definitely taught me to listen to my intuition and always take notice of my surroundings. Please, everyone, I know you hear this all the time, but seriously, always be aware of your surroundings. You just never know who's lurking around the corner or what could happen. This happened at a large shopping center in Adelaide, South Australia a couple of months ago. For some context, it was around 7 p.m. on a late trading night, already completely dark outside. I was shopping with my partner and she went into a clothing store, both to make some returns and also try on some replacement clothes. I knew it would only take a little bit of time and I'm not overly interested in women clothing, so I stood outside in the very busy center and was responding to some work emails on my phone and paying very little attention to all of the people walking past me. After about 5 minutes, I was then approached by a fairly young looking gentleman. He was early to mid-20s at most. I'm 23 myself. He had a very strong European accent, possibly French, who then said something to me along the lines of,
"You were with a girl, yes? She was looking for you. She came up to me, I think, because we are wearing similar shirts and thought you were me."
Thinking back on it, other than the buttons on our shirts, there was nothing really similar at all. He told me that she was trying to find me and made it seem like something was wrong, and then he insisted that he could show me where she went. I looked inside of the store and I couldn't see my partner. I was extremely confused at the time. My partner knows that I could just be aimlessly pacing in circles outside, as I do when I'm reading my emails, and she would never just walk off looking for me. Not to mention she could have just texted or called me. Although confused, he was moving away pretty fast enough that I didn't have any time to ask many questions, and not being able to see my partner convinced me to at least follow where he was going. There had to have been hundreds of people around at the time, so I wasn't very worried for my own well-being. As I followed the gentleman, I was leaving a good 2 or so meters between us, walking behind. I don't remember feeling overly unsafe or concerned about being near him, just really confused and unsure. He could see that, and he kept repeating something along the lines of,
"This isn't a joke. Please believe me. I want to help you. Come with me. She went this way. I saw where she went."
We had only been walking for about 10 seconds at this point, but we were covering a fair bit of distance from the store that I was originally at. I said something like, "Where was she going? What did she say to you?" And he then told me,
"Sorry, my English isn't very good. She is this way."
So we kept walking like this for around another 10 seconds before we reached the doors of the building. We were on a side of the center that has doors leading to both a car park and a large loading dock for one of the supermarkets. Although busy in the center, there was almost no one around the doors going in and out. The man then walked straight outside and said something along the lines of,
"She was sitting just on this bench. I don't know where she went."
Other than a small bit of light under the cover where a bench is, it was completely dark as soon as you walked any further away. I walked up to the point where the automatic doors open, but no further, and then looked. He then said something like,
"She must have walked this way. Come, I'll help you find her."
And then started to walk left, which only leads to a dark and secluded loading dock. You could tell the urgency that he was trying to convey to follow him. I really want to add that I was already very confused and unsure up until that point, but as soon as it happened, I knew that whatever he wanted me to follow him down there for wasn't good. It was one of those moments where you piece it all together and then realize how many warning signs you somewhat noticed but then ignored. I just instantly knew I was in danger and I needed to get away now. I remember saying to the guy, "You know, man, don't worry about it, I'll just call her," and then turning straight around and walking back inside. I then turned around after a few seconds, and I couldn't see him outside anymore. Now, although this felt like a really long time, all of this had transpired in just about 45 seconds from when he first started talking to me, and it was at this point that I started texting my partner, who let me know that she was still at the same store that I last saw her at. I then told my partner that I believed I was almost abducted. A bit over the top, especially for a fairly large 20-year-old bloke, I think. I'm assuming that if I actually went down there, I was probably just getting robbed or something. I'm really glad that I'll never know. After this all happened, I decided to go straight to the center security and report it. They took some of the details of where and when it happened, but didn't really seem overly concerned about it. All I know is I had a bad feeling, and there's no telling what was going to happen to me. I really hope I never experience anything like this ever again. This happened in my first year at uni in Australia. I was moving out of home for the very first time, and I think this made me very, very naive in this situation. I'd also like to add I'm a 20-year-old female. I found a really cheap place in the city near my workplace and uni at the time. It was for a room in a share house only about 20 minutes out from the CBD. It seemed like a real awesome deal to me, and I messaged the landlord and told her I was interested. Before she gave me some time to come and inspect the place, she seemed overly interested in my ethnic background. I'm half Ethiopian, so I definitely don't look white, but when I told her I'm Australian, she suddenly became withdrawn. I thought it was strange. Maybe she thought I was lying because she had seen my profile photo on flatmates.com. So I explained my background. She seemed pretty satisfied with my answer, and we organized a time for me to come and see the room. I will call the landlord Denise for the sake of the story. Denise showed me around and talked as if the place was already mine, which I thought was pretty exciting. There was a main house with about 5 bedrooms, a caravan on the side, and a granny flat behind it with 3 bedrooms, and that's where I would be moving in. The main house and caravan were pretty full. There were about 7 people living there, but only one of the rooms in the granny flat was occupied. It was nice enough considering, and very clean. A weekly cleaner was actually included in the rent price, as well as a weekly maintenance man. I didn't really think to ask what that meant because I was already pretty set on moving into the place. I then met the people who would go on to be my housemates. All of them were foreigners, mostly Chinese or South Korean who had come over here to study. I still didn't really find any of this odd. I mean, there's plenty of international students here already. The door to my room had a lock on it, and I was told only myself and Denise had a key. But Denise never usually came to the house, so there was a nice level of privacy. About a week after I moved in, I met the maintenance guy. Let's call him Patrick. He seemed to be gardening, and he then came over to introduce himself, and he seemed pretty nice enough. I then found out he's Denise's brother, and he looked to be around in his late 40s or so. I found him to be a bit awkward, but I've been raised to be polite to a fault, so I ended up talking to him for a really long time before going back to my room. I don't really remember what we talked about, but I remember that he kept saying things like I was very beautiful, and describing my skin as exotic and caramel more than once, which really rubbed me the wrong way. A few days later, the cleaner comes also. She's super lovely and has known Denise and Patrick for a long time. She and I had a really nice chat, and for some reason she decided to bring up that Patrick was on the autism spectrum. So that kind of explained his awkwardness to me, and I realized he's harmless. I actually felt kind of bad about my initial judgment of him. The next time I saw Patrick, I came out into the kitchen and saw him standing there. This struck me as odd. 1, it was in the morning and I was in my pajamas, having just woken up. And 2, he's the maintenance guy. I really didn't understand why he should be inside in the first place, but I still felt bad, so I just kind of smiled and said hello to him. He then turned and seemed startled, but explained to me that he was just taking out the trash. I saw that he had replaced the bins in the kitchen, so I was just like, oh, okay. He's just trying to be nice, I guess. But I still told him that he really didn't have to do that. He just kind of insisted, and I just let it be. No big deal. So I ended up talking to him again, and once again, he seemed to have this really weird fixation with me being exotic, even though I told him I was born in Australia. But he was mostly just generally asking how I was finding the place, and he then reiterated that everything was super safe, and for some reason he brought up the keys to the bedrooms. He said only me, Denise, and he had keys. I didn't say anything out loud, but in my head I just kind of thought, wait, so when does he have a key to my place? But I still just kind of brushed it off. Cut to a few months later. So I work about 4 to 6 days a week, as well as going to university 4 days. So I'm really rarely there during the day, and I always lock my bedroom door before leaving every day. I don't remember exactly what time of year this would have been, but I know it was around the colder time, and I haven't used the ceiling fan in my room for a really long time. I got home, unlocked my bedroom door, and the ceiling fan was on. Now, this struck me as odd immediately. I just knew that I hadn't turned it on in forever. I was really confused, and I thought that I'd turned it on while leaving, and maybe I just didn't remember. I brought it up with my roommate, and she just kind of shrugged and said that it's odd, but she didn't really seem weirded out by it. So I figured I was just overthinking it. I'd also like to add that I always kept to myself a lot. I wasn't close to any of my roommates, and I only talked to this woman occasionally. A few weeks later, I'm leaving for work, and I have this really strange feeling while walking to the front gate of the house. For some reason, I decide to turn around, and I see Patrick hiding behind some trees, just staring at me. As soon as he's caught, he then turns and pretends to be gardening. In the moment, my mind actually kind of went blank. I mean, surely he wasn't watching me, right? All I did was frown and kind of just wonder to myself why he would even stare at me like that and then pretend he hadn't been. I come back later in the day, unlock my door, walk in, and again, Something's just really off, but this time I can't put my finger on it. I stand in my room looking around, just staring at everything in the room, but I can't find anything. When I realize that I don't really know what I'm looking for, I just feel kinda creeped out and leave my room, and I tell my roommate again that I thought someone had been in my room. This time, however, she sat down with me and basically said that she thought someone had went into her room as well. We started to chat and she said that she had left her bedroom window open when she went to work, and when she came home it was shut. I brought up the fan again and my roommate said that maybe we should let Denise know about this. So I texted Denise and said something along the lines of, "So I think someone's been going into my room because of X and X event," and my roommate said the same thing. I exchanged a few messages with Denise, but the general response was just, "Oh, wow, that's so bizarre." Again, being super naive, young, and too polite for my own good, I assumed that I was just overreacting, and I didn't want to seem like a bad tenant. Thankfully for me, it turns out that Denise was more than sympathetic than I realized, because she said she was going to have the locks changed the very next day. I was just really excited and assumed that that would be it. But in my head, I was just thinking, only 3 people have the keys. Me, Denise, and Patrick. So I mean, if someone had been coming in, wouldn't it have been one of us 3? Which is also why that I didn't really feel good when Patrick showed up the next day to change the lock himself. You know, being the maintenance guy and all. I ended up leaving while he did the change to the locks. I got a text message later on saying that it was done and the new keys were in the mailbox. Fast forward. I had now been in this place for nearly a year. By now I was aware that Patrick seemed to come over about twice a week, and he always came inside the house to take out the rubbish, but never seemed to really do any maintenance work. I kind of just chalked it up to Denise giving him a job because maybe he couldn't find one anywhere else, and I always tried to avoid him whenever necessary. As far as I can remember, nothing really seemed that strange, that is, until now. I come home from work again and walk into my bedroom while I'm getting my clothes to shower. I noticed something very, very strange that was definitely not there when I left. There was some kind of whitish/pale gunk that was kind of splattered upwards on the wall and the floor. Honestly, my first thought when looking at it after a while was like, that looks like a donut glaze or something. I leaned a little closer to it, but still didn't really register what the stuff was. Only that I definitely hadn't spilled anything there at all. So again, I got pretty creeped out, went into the kitchen to grab a Chuck's and then wipe it up, when I then had a thought like, wait, is that semen? I really didn't know what to look for, but as soon as I had that thought, there was really nothing that could convince me otherwise. And again, my bedroom door had been locked. Only myself, Denise, and Patrick had keys. My roommate wasn't home, but I decided to call Denise right away. She didn't answer, so instead I decided to message her and basically said that someone had been in my room and there was some weird stuff plastered all over my wall. I wanted to see if she had come to the same conclusion as I did. Her response this time was really off. She messaged me back a few hours later and was really dismissive and said something along the lines of, "Well, that's pretty bizarre, but the lock has been changed." I mean, yeah, obviously, so who do you think would have been in there? I felt so weird and grossed out that I went to a friend's place and messaged my stepdad about it. I told him about everything for the first time, and I guess it sounds a lot worse when it's all at once because his response was like, "Hell no, you're moving out of there ASAP." I called Denise and told her I was going to move out if the issue wasn't taken seriously. This is when I started to realize that the leasing situation at this place was really dodgy, which I didn't really know beforehand due to lack of experience and no sense to ask. Essentially, there was really no record of me actually being a tenant, and I was kind of just sending money into this lady's bank account, but there wasn't any official paperwork. I looked back over all of the stuff that I'd signed when I initially moved in, and it was all typed up by Denise, I assume. I don't remember the details, but it wasn't official at all. I was so naive. So anyways, I was pretty much able to move out ASAP. Denise didn't put up a fuss about the short notice. Denise didn't really put up a fuss about the short notice, and when I came back the next day, the stuff on the wall was gone, so I didn't really have any proof of what happened. But still, that just kind of confirmed to me that something weird was going on with Denise and Patrick. My stepdad helped me take all of my stuff, and Denise just left a message asking me to leave the keys on the counter. It really took me a few weeks to process all of the creepy things that happened to me throughout my stay and put it all together as a massive creep fest. My roommate left soon after as well. A couple of months later, she messaged me to say that one of the old housemates told her that the police were called to the place, but I don't know why or what happened. But if I had to take a guess, I really doubt it was over the tenants. Patrick and Denise, I don't know what the heck was going on or what you guys were up to, but I really hope I don't see either of you ever again. I'm an 18-year-old male. I moved from my hometown with my mom about a year ago, now into a farmhouse pretty much in the middle of nowhere on the east side of Australia. It was at the very end of a 7-kilometer long driveway that had about 2 other houses on it, both with elderly couples in them, and a 30-minute drive from the nearest town, which is very small, only having about 1,000 people living there. I'd feel really uncomfortable some nights when I was outside having a cigarette. The old feel like you're being watched feeling, and occasionally would wake up and hear footsteps outside that I was sure didn't sound like the sheep and rams that were right near our place. Now, I have a history of drug abuse and I'm quite a paranoid person because of it, so I tried to rationalize it all by telling myself I was just being paranoid. One night, I woke up at around 3 a.m. and needed to take a piss when I looked out my bedroom window and very briefly saw a flash of light like it had come off a torch or a phone. Seeing as though we lived in the middle of freaking nowhere, this really freaked me out quite a lot, and I stayed up until morning just listening and looking out, but I didn't really hear anything. Maybe about a week later or so, my stepdad's lawnmower had its tire slashed, which my stepdad had blamed on me, but I didn't really care because it just further enforced the idea that there was somebody lurking around our property. My mom knows that I would never do something like that, and instead she thought that the neighbor had done it. I always chatted with the neighbor when I went for walks, and I really liked him, and I really doubt that he would have done it, let alone be able to walk that far, as he was pretty old, and if he came in a vehicle that late at night, we definitely would have heard it. My stepdad actually ended up moving out because of it, and I don't mean to get too personal, but he's a drinker. I witnessed him on the verge of being very violent with my mom, and I actually intervened and messed him up a little. So he moved out the next day, and thankfully, we haven't really seen him since. And no, the things that happened after he was gone were 100% not him. It wasn't even considered to us that it could be him, because it just wasn't. Trust me. With him now gone and it only being me, my mom, and my 3-year-old sister there, and considering we can't legally own a gun in Australia, and the cops would take a good hour to get out to us if we needed them, I got increasingly paranoid about all of the things that had been going on, because I felt like I had to be protective. Some nights I would stay up very late, and before going to sleep, I would turn off all of the lights and walk around silently looking out the windows for any signs. And sure enough, on a few occasions, I would see torches way off in the distance in the middle of the cow paddocks, as if somebody saw all of the house lights turn off and started making their way over at 3 a.m. Which is really weird to say the least, considering that in every direction other than towards the other houses on our road, there was absolutely nothing but bush and paddocks for a good 20 kilometers. I should also add that our front door didn't properly lock and could easily be opened by just messing with the handle a bit. So I started putting a wheelbarrow up against the door and a metal sheet behind the wheelbarrow so if the door opened it would make a very loud noise that would definitely wake me up. A few weeks went by and I saw and heard absolutely nothing, so I began to get much less paranoid and was thinking about it a lot less. One night I had gotten back from the pub and I was a bit drunk, still on my phone in the lounge room. All of the lights were off because my mom and my sister were asleep, and I was just kind of laying there texting whoever and listening to music. We have 2 cats, and on this night they were pretty frisky and running around pretty wildly. So when I heard the metal sheet that I had in front of the door then slam on the ground, I figured it was just the cats and ignored it and walked straight past to my room maybe about half an hour later, not even giving it a glance. The very next morning, my paranoia immediately came back in full swing. I proceeded to freak out when I see that not only the sheet had fallen over, the door itself was ajar and the wheelbarrow had moved a good 6 inches as well, which there's no way either of my cats could have done that. The only explanation I have for this is that somebody tried to let themselves in, heard the bang, and then ran off. A few nights after this all happened, my mom woke me up pretty late at around 4 a.m. She asked me to come out to her car with her because all of her car lights were on, and she didn't want to go out by herself. We went outside and turned it all off and brought the keys, which we'd usually just leave in the car with us inside. The car battery was dead and we would have to get our neighbor to come down with some jumper cables the following day. She was absolutely certain that she didn't leave any of the lights on and that all of the doors were shut, meaning somebody went inside, pressed the button on the roof, put the key in the ignition, and then exited and closed the door, with what we think was the intention of draining the battery. She began agreeing with me that somebody was definitely lurking around the house and told me a few things that she had noticed that she just didn't want to tell me because I was already anxious about it all, and she didn't want to make it worse. She told me that the tank water started tasting really funny, and she found a half-dead decomposed possum on the grate on top of the tank. She didn't really mention how she couldn't possibly see how it could have ended up there unless it happened to die right there on that exact spot, and somehow didn't start making the water taste funny until it was so decomposed that you could see its bones, and also how a garden rock was then moved in a weird position right outside her window, as if somebody was using it to stand on to look inside. I'd also like to add that the house closest to the road had multiple dogs. The one that I was pretty friendly with, who lived closer, maybe about 3 kilometers from us, had a gun, and he would often shoot rabbits and foxes. So that definitely makes us the easiest target. All of these strange things made us really concerned, and we ended up finding a house and moving out about a month later. I know this is anticlimactic, but it still freaks me the heck out, as I can't think of any other explanation other than somebody was lurking around our house for multiple months. There were many times where there was nobody home all day, so if they wanted to steal from us, they easily could have come in and just taken all of our stuff, but nothing was ever missing. Maybe I really am just overthinking all of this, but I really do believe that whoever it was had some very sinister intentions and were intentionally just screwing with us. Maybe it was innocent pranks, or maybe there was someone around who just really wanted us gone. I really have no idea, but I'm just really glad we no longer have to deal with it anymore. These encounters happened in early 2016. These encounters happened to me in early of 2016. I live in Perth, Western Australia, and was living in the suburb of Palmyra at the time. The local supermarket was called Woolworths, and it was conveniently situated right across the road from mine and my girlfriend's house at the time. Obviously, groceries were a necessity, and one day I was smoking outside in the car park of the grocery store, reading a book on criminal psychology. I was in my own little world when I felt someone tap on me on the shoulder and ask for a lighter. She was one of the shop's employees on her break. She had shoulder-length brunette hair and dark eyes, and she looked to be around the same age as myself. As we were smoking, we started casually chatting, and she looked at my book with curiosity, then explaining to me that serial killers had always fascinated her. I agreed, as criminology and true crime has always been one of my favorite topics ever since I was a teenager. She suddenly got this really weird smile across her face and told me that she'd actually written a book about serial killers. The hairs on my arm stood on end, but I brushed it off as it just being cold, as it was quite windy that day. She said she had to go back to work, but that I should come by some other day and chat crime with her. She shook my hand and told me that her name was Gemma. Looking back, I got a really strange feeling from her. A slight uncomfortable twist in the gut that I just kind of passed off as her seeming to be a bit of an outcast. She just seemed a bit different, but nothing that was overly concerning. Over the next few weeks, I saw Gemma sporadically and even had a few coffees with her at Smoko. Smoko is smoke break, by the way. We didn't really talk about anything personal. She was very guarded and vague if I asked any personal questions, but she could talk my ear off about music, serial killers, and crime. She had her favorite killers that she had found most interesting. One particular incident that stood out to me was when we were debating the use of the death penalty in America, when she then grabbed my arm out of the blue and then said, "Don't you ever want to know what it feels like to kill someone?" I was taken aback as it was such a direct question, and one that I could never even think of doing, let alone feeling. I shrugged my shoulders and then said, "No way. I'd rather be a criminal psychologist and help put killers away." She kind of just stared off into the distance and then said, "I think I could do it. I mean, if I really wanted to." Work started to get really busy for the next few months, and I didn't really see Gemma after that. I asked some of the other employees, but they said that she was on holidays. Shortly after that, I moved out of that house, so I never visited that shop again. I never really gave another thought. I was absolutely shocked to see and read the news articles about a year and a half later that she and an older female friend of hers had actually murdered an autistic teenager, and she was actually in prison awaiting sentencing. It made my blood run cold. I always look back now and feel really horrified that I even talked criminology with her. I've always been interested in wanting to know why criminals behave in certain ways, but it gives me a sick feeling to think that that was the subject of our conversations. I feel so bad for the murdered guy's family. It's just so tragic. I definitely hope I never see Gemma ever again, and I really hope justice gets served. Hey everyone. These were definitely some pretty crazy stories, but I really hope you enjoyed the video. And once again, if you can help out in any way, please consider checking out and donating to the Bushfire Fund, which will be linked in the description and in a pinned comment. And before we end this video, I also want to add, I know it's been a while since I've made a video. I've just really been in a lot of pain lately with my back, and I've pretty much been bedridden the past 2 weeks. But I'm trying to heal and get better as quick as possible so I can get back to making these creepy videos for you guys. But alright everyone, I'll see you in the next one. And remember to always stay hungry.